an attack has been set up against our infrastructure by Russia and China, almost like, all right, maybe somebody wants to control the planet before the end so that they make sure they get all the food.
And good afternoon, everyone. As always, you're looking for brilliant minds to try to let us see into the future so we can take action and get ready for these changes that we all see. So today with me, I got J.R. Nyquist, writer and also geopolitical pinpoints and data across a wide array of disciplines. It comes up with a much wider picture or tapestry of global events. So if you want to check out more, jrnyquist.blog. And perhaps they would put that two and two together that, wow, food production is going to be affected in this many months or this many years to the point where the starvation is going to topple governments. And in the lead up to that, you're going to start to see some massive weather events, which we are daily now seeing 1,000-year floods daily. Sprites, electric sprites hanging in the sky for seconds. Before they were thought a thing of legend, but it's just an electrical discharge that's holding state longer. That's now visible through camera. If that thing is up there long enough for you to see it and press your shutter on that and take a photo of it, that's a long duration sprite that's up there. Before they would be 1,000th of a second, they'd get in a high speed camera. But now these things are hanging up there in such an electrified state in our atmosphere that people see it and like, oh, there's that, and they're able to press their camera and get the photo. That's the difference in length of 1 or 2,000th of a second versus, hey, honey, hold on, I need to get the photo of the sprites in the sky. You know, you're talking thousands of times more powerful. And that's starting to be seen globally everywhere now. It got knocked loose in clouds behaving strangely. So again, governments are going to have to respond to this. For their continuity plans would be rushed and sped up in terms of implementation. But also, how would you control the global populace to a point of almost thumbscrewing them without the appearance of the visible bars in front of them? And we're starting to get that combination of both happening. So something definitely has sped up the timelines for governance across the planet.
And you've got this. It's weird. The FBI is seeing these that China has put all these backdoors and malware on our power grid, and Russia has put malware in our water systems. An attack has been set up against our infrastructure by Russia and China, almost like, all right, maybe somebody wants to control the planet before the end so that they make sure they get all the food. You almost have to wonder what the thought is there and whether they can actually do it. I think we talked before about China's bankruptcy. China's running their economy into the ground. Financially, 200 trillion lost in their real estate bubble crash. Their banks aren't working. So
the
it's
bank
like
run's happening right now. Talk about that for a second. Wow.
oh yeah. Yeah. And of course, the West is not that far behind in terms of, well, we're not as bad off as China is, but look at the indebtedness of the cities, the states, and the federal government. And it seems to me that there's a kind of loss of control. And I wonder if there's a behavioral connection between electromagnetic activity from the sun and people themselves is going haywire.
Pro Clear Cleanse is the most powerful spray cleaner on the market today. No elbow grease necessary. Pro Clear Cleanse cuts through grease and grime like a chef's knife. Finally, the one cleaner that can do it all. Powerful surfactant cleaning technology cleans ovens, glass, porcelain, even polished wood. Environmentally friendly, less packaging and waste with no harsh smells, pet safe, child safe. 5 tablets equals 1 bottle of traditional cleaner. It's 5 months of cleaning for a fraction of the cost. Behold the grease-erasing power of Odor Crush. Simply drop a tablet into your bottle of warm water and shake it so it is evenly diluted. Spray the surface you want cleaned. Let set longer for tougher grease. Take a paper towel or a reusable cloth and wipe. Done and done.
Absolutely. Because you look at the lobes of your brain, just on the simplest construct here. They're electrically connected.
Yes.
If you only have half your brain, you're not functioning because you got the lobes there, right? So if you interfere with that's why when people get electrocuted, what happens? Generally, they have brain damage or some sort of thing.
Yes.
Anything electrical that interferes with that system of the body functions on the physiology of that, the way you process reality, if it's going to be more excited and there's going to be more energy inflow into the system, then your brains are going to perceive and pick up those electrical signals differently, and you're going to start to perceive the reality around you in a very different fashion. And I really believe this is what terrifies the leaders of our world. So you can see these very clean demarcations in time, and you can speak to this more eloquently than I can, but you start to see changes inside society where one system was once rock solid and then suddenly it shifts. Either the people shifted or the government shifted it, or in tandem, they both shifted it away from into a new different system. Well, that system is the new system that's going to be able to hold state in a faster vibratory pattern. So you're telling me that we're going to central bank digital currencies, distribution blockchain, digitization of all assets for ownership, and that just magically random happenstance at this same time of all the electromagnetic changes on the sun, the loss of food production, and the changes of governments, the way they've completely corralled the planet and everything is moving in unison. And we're supposed to believe that's just because it's Thursday and they woke up on that side of the bed? Like, please.
One of the things about this whole question of the solar minimum and the ice ages, we're in a 2 million year ice age, but we're in an interglacial period in there, is that there's been this change in the Earth over the last few million years, which is a huge change. And of course, there's been a change in the way the planet actually works. There's growing respect, maybe growing interest in catastrophism. Now they're extending the number of years human beings have been on the earth. Now I understand they're saying 250,000 years we've been here, not just 200,000. You just go back to the 1980s, and they said, well, we've only been here, modern man has only been here 50,000 years. Well, of course, this is as we keep extending, we're getting closer to forbidden archaeology. Michael Primo's book, where they find in coal mines, there's famous things they found. There's what appear to be devices, technological objects in coal strata. Here, Whitney of the Whitney Survey, they named Mount Whitney after him in California in the 1860s. They found a skeleton in a gold mine out in Trinity County that was like, he went out and looked at it, and it was in a gold vein that thing had to be that skeleton had to be there for 1 million years. When you look at this catastrophism, and I remember Eric Vergin, the political philosopher, he was once commented about one of the reasons he abandoned some of his speculation about the ancient civilizations, because he learned all these ancient languages to try to understand the origins of our political thought going back. And he said, we don't know how far back this goes, because 50,000 years, and he's talking in the 80s, anything could have happened in those 50,000 years. And now if it's 250,000 years that human beings have been, are you telling me we were hunter-gatherers for 250,000 years and nobody invented a light bulb? And of course, more and more they're making these findings. And of course, the interesting thing is that if you have a cycle of catastrophe, and a lot of these ancient artifacts and numbers and the mysticism and the knowledge past, like we see in Hamlet's Mill, that book written by the two scientists back in the late 1960s, the idea that these processional numbers indicate an attempt to warn us about a recurring event. And some of these ancient legends, the one author of that book, she had been studying Polynesian myths. And she said, these aren't from history. Where are they coming from? Where are these Polynesian myths coming from? They're not historical. They're something else, but they don't seem to have any meaning. And she was thinking after 10 years of quitting because she just didn't understand what she was looking at. She went to bed, and then she had this dream, or this epiphany while she was dreaming, that, wait a minute, the two major holy sites in the Pacific of the Polynesians, one was on the Tropic of Cancer and the other was on the Tropic of Capricorn. And then she said, wait a minute, that is those are scientific did they know that this was the Tropic of Capricorn and Cancer? Why did they place them there? So then they began to realize, the authors of that book began to realize there's astronomical and earth science knowledge in these ancient myths. We just have not decoded them yet to know what they mean, what our ancestors were trying to warn us about. So somebody's trying to signal us about something. And then going back to what Solon was told by the Egyptians, that there are these recurring catastrophes, not just floods when, asteroids crash the earth, which the priests had told him about. What causes the earth to flood is there are these giant objects in space that crash into the oceans and displace the water onto the land, which Solon was told about. But there's this solar event thing that is referred to there. And so the question is, are we looking at evidence that we're close to one of these major events?
I would say yes, but the intensity of the event is to be seen.
Less dramatic event than a really world destructive one, right?
Well, you have to think how fragile our infrastructure is currently.
Yes.
And even a very light event would take us back pretty much to the Stone Age. And when I say that, that's no joke, because if we lose our water and we lose our food delivery and we lose international transport and we lose telecommunications. So take it back to if we were living in a quote unquote Stone Age environment or pioneering environment, would probably be better because we'd retain some tools and, some know-how, and there'd be books around so DIYers could get it back together with a local community. And there's a lot of skills, and a lot of people have a lot of skills these days. So we could pick up the pieces and make it work much faster. But taking it back to, you're going to fend for your own water. You're going to have to purify your own water. You're going to have to grow your own food. You're going to have to hunt. You're going to have to store foods, dehydrate foods like our, ancestors did. There's going to be a lot more work involved with it. There'll be no leisure time. You'll always be busy trying to stay alive for a while. Right. So that would be pretty much bringing us back to the Stone Age. Like it would knock us back several hundred years in development. There's a lot of variables inside this intensity and the population left over and the information left over in the population.
And there's this other peculiar thing that I've been looking into, and it's the UFO disclosure thing that's been going on with Congress, with the testimony of David Grush. And apparently, the statement that there have been craft recovered, they don't refer the beings as extraterrestrials. And there's more and more talk from UFO investigators about breakaway civilizations or something that survived from the distant past that's been with us on the planet. People that maybe before the flood, before the last catastrophe, somehow retained something and have been lurking in the background, watching civilization recover. Speculations of this kind, and there's been people like I don't really care for his analysis much, but it's rather interesting because I think his knowledge of philosophy and the history of technology is very good. Is people like Jason Giorgiani. I have a lot of knowledge of history, and I think I understand how history works better than some of these folks. But there's some strange things. Like Vergin said, almost anything could have happened in this 50,000 years, and so we don't exactly know what's going on in terms of some very strange things that have happened in the recent development of the human race, and anomalous. Has the U.S. Got technology that's really super advanced? Did the Germans develop something that we got? Are there people who, like Captain Nemo in the famous Jules Verne stories, got technology at some point in the past, and there's a group of people with this technology that are intervening in history, that are manipulating things? It's very hard to know what's going on, but there is, as you say, some unexplained things about the way people behave. Are we really as stupid as we seem? We're pretty stupid. And yet things seem to work out for us in certain areas that almost shouldn't be. And so I'm almost left wondering, and of course, there's people have believed in providence for a long time. And when we look at the twilight of abundance, 8 billion people on the planet, and the possibility of a sudden die-off, where you could lose 4/5 of the world population from a solar flare, or more, larger amount of the population, or you could have a less dramatic event like global cooling, where you're going to lose maybe half the world's population, or maybe a third. And the kind of political turmoil, how do you get through that? How do human beings pull together? Do they fight each other? What are the reactions of governments? And are there people with more advanced knowledge of what's going to happen who have a plan?
For sure. Yes, they do. And how would you front run that anger out of the populace not being told about all these issues? There's layers of that as well, because people are going to be, okay, if it would have just snuck out of the blue and hit us, okay, that's one thing. But have this advanced knowledge and like, wait, you were holding on this for what, 30 years, 20 years, 50 years, 70 years, however long it was. And you have to ask yourself, how would people react to that? Like, wait, you didn't let me and my family get, even if you had 20 years of prepared knowledge in front of you, like, okay, 20 years from now, things are going to start happening. Get ready. You guys got to break off and be autonomous. But then the stock prices and corporate valuations would be, thrown into the air. Our present economy wouldn't work right because people wouldn't invest and save for the future. So the world, to get ready for the catastrophe, needed to be maintained as long as it could. There needed to be a status quo for enough capital and investments and credit for those things to be built out for those, whatever it is, the infrastructure, the food production, the savings of food, the construction of the facilities to survive the event. Like, that wouldn't be possible if we didn't have a functional economy.
Right.
So
Yeah, no, you couldn't. And people don't realize, with the system of investment that we have, people don't realize that your standard of living depends on continual reinvestment in technology and infrastructure to keep everything moving. And if we don't, and you see, investment requires optimism. And that optimism is, I'm going to give my paycheck, part of my paycheck every year, to these investments for me to retire on. And these investments are going to give me a return enough that I can retire at the age of 60 or whatever. And the interesting thing is that the minute people say, all right, there's going to be a catastrophe in 10 years, I'm stopping investing.
How do you feed your families when the shelves are empty, the stores are shut, and there's no food available? What is the fastest, easiest, and most productive foods to grow? What is the quickest way to get somebody who has no skills at all up and running and producing very quickly? If you understand that we're at a point in history where it is no longer optional to be growing your own food, if you're like really freaked out and concerned because you've never grown food before and you don't have any skills, you don't know how to do that, but you know how important it is, then I want to let you know, however you stumbled here, you're in the right place. My name is Marjorie Wildcraft. I'm the founder of the Grow Network, and I have been the female leader in the survival and preparedness space for the last 20 years.
How to grow lots of food, even if you have no experience, are older and out of shape. This is for people who want the fastest and easiest ways to produce healthy and delicious meat, eggs, and vegetables. Because you know that growing your own food is like printing your own money. During this webinar, you will get status of global food shortages, how long the crisis will last, how much space you need to grow food, easiest, highest calorie foods you can produce, a complete plan for producing all the food you need, how to get started today, regardless of season. Marjorie will show you the fastest, easiest, and simplest ways to produce calories and nutrition, especially in a crisis and/or grid-down situation. The assumption is that you have no experience and you need to start producing food immediately. The most popular part of the webinar is the Q&A session at the end. So please come prepared with your questions.
Then all of a sudden the system grinds to a halt the minute people think that they see the end coming. Because it really does depend on belief that things are going to get better. Because otherwise, nobody's going to part with that money. They're going to use that money to try to survive in the near term, right?
Well, then we see the printing of never-ending money across, you get China, the EU, United States, Australia. It doesn't matter where you sit. They are printing and fictitiously and artificially increasing values to give that optimism to keep this system going as long as it can. And, you know, you look out and it's bare for everybody to see. We're switching systems over to the BRICS aligned nations. We're moving away from dollar. Is that true, really? Or is it just a way to print more money and keep people strung along for that little bit extra time? Because I tell you what COVID did, it allowed the world to print more money than had ever been printed in human history without even blinking an eye. Nobody even asked why. They doubled the money supply, and suddenly, you know, what about all that extra money? That seems like a fast track tactic for me. Double the money supply and build more stuff more quickly, because it's even more inbound faster than. So at the very end, they're going to pull the plug. And at that point, unknown, but how do you think governments would react then? They'll be in their arc by that point. They won't really care. They never cared.
There's only so many lifeboats on the Titanic. Of course, they go to the first class passengers, right? The lower class passengers, they didn't get any lifeboats. Most of the people that died on the Titanic were not people of the upper crust. And even among the wealthy people on the Titanic, the men didn't get a lifeboat. They gave it to the women and to children first. It seems to me that so do you see evidence then that there is this kind of lifeboat getting ready to man the lifeboats kind of indicators and things you're seeing in different countries? I mean, the chicken registration is an interesting data point. Are there other data points like this?
Well, there seemed to be a concerted effort to shut down all raw dairy distribution anywhere currently. Anybody who has any kind of raw milk product made from butter, creams, anything like this, there is a huge amount of enforcement going on behind the scenes right now in almost every state across the United States. If anybody who has a cow share or something like this that provides raw milk.
Well, you know, there is a disturbing aspect to this that if you have a nuclear war, milk is one of the main things contaminated by strontium-90, which is an isotope from radiation of detonating nuclear devices. I mean, that almost sounds like they're getting ready for a nuclear war. Because you would want to regulate, because you see, the problem is if you can't keep track of what milk is contaminated, people eat that, they're going to get that strontium-90 in their bones, and you're going to get leukemias and cancers down the road and maybe in millions of people, right? If those people drink that milk. That is a disturbing data point about milk.
Well, your mind is coming that they really care about you that much that they would do it. You know, I'm looking at it more as a cash cow payday for some remediation for that. Because if the nuclear war starts, that should be y'all's trigger that they're pulling up the gates to the moat of the castle, that the distraction and the chaos and the market collapses are going to allow them to escape. And governments are going to be there. Don't think it's just individuals. It's going to be company CEOs, heads, government heads, all these people that are in charge of government continuity, and they're all going to roll up into their, you know, facilities somewhere. And it's going to be millions of people, but they're going to need a massive amount of reasons why they can escape and get out of Dodge, for a better term, all in unison, all on the same day or the same minute or the same hour.
It's hard for me to imagine that in that kind of situation that any government remains in effect, that anybody remains in charge. That what you get is you're going to break down. Everything's going to break down like it did when the Roman Empire collapsed. That it's going to break down into local barons. And the local baron is a tough guy in the neighborhood who's, you know, the new sheriff in town, so to speak, who's able to protect people and decide who eats. It's not going to be governments that are going to do that. Of course, what I've tracked in studying political sociology and science is that in modernity, you have this thing where people in positions of authority and the whole concept of bureaucracy seems to over time break down into the we don't want to do anything if we don't have to because we're bureaucrats and we get paid no matter what we do. And let's lie because we just bungled, so we'll blame it on something else and we'll lie about it. And of course, if you look at the history of government, those governments that are effective are the ones that understand reality, can communicate it, don't really lie. And the heroes of history are the people that see the truth and are brave enough to speak it and make a real positive change. Those are the heroes. Thomas Carlyle famously wrote his book on heroes and hero worship, and that was his thesis of the book, is that the heroes in history, they're just people who were honest, who actually had the courage to stand up and say, the emperor's naked. What do you mean? And of course, when many times those people get squished and stomped for some reason, and this is Carlyle's interpretation, Providence or God steps in and says, all right, this guy's important. We're going to let him do something miraculous happens and the truth comes out. This is an interesting view of history, but I think we've reached a particular low point in terms of telling the truth. And I begin to wonder if they're so convoluted that they could even see the truth if they were told it.
Take away from that statement right there,
Yeah.
that we are going to need to rely on our communities. So to start to build those relationships with those you think are honest and those you think might be a leader of a community if there were a governmental breakdown. Like those are the people you want to start to, know or introduce yourself or hang around more. Also, your local vendors, they're still going to have stock when everything, even if the supply chains are broken down, they always have extra, some stuff in a barn, in a warehouse or whatever. Those are the people you're going to want to trade with, the local people that you know in your local community and their local stores, hardware stores, whatever it is, foodstuffs, could be anything, bakeries. They all have the skills. Those are people you're going to want to communicate and connect with prior to this happening. And then you also knowing that this is just baked in, no pun intended, for bread making, but you're going to have to be responsible for more of your food. Now, you can't grow everything, obviously. So if you can overproduce something, take that and understand how the value can be used to then trade on for something else that you could use. I mean, this is the perfect scenario to put in a solution right now, because as it looks for both of us here, centralized systems are going to break down, erode, or completely stop functioning. Now, okay, it could be traumatic for some, but if you're already prepared for that and you already know a lot of people around your community and you are producing your own food, it's going to definitely give you an enormous amount of time, way ahead of everybody else, to solidify that and to be your own protectors of your communities, because that's what's going to be on. Look through history. And I mean, Jeffrey, maybe you could talk about, how in localized communities before the kings and queens had their armies coming in, how did people protect themselves really of a community of 200, 400, 500 people that would be considered a town? How did they protect themselves through history? Because there are always bandits out there, always. You never traveled alone. You never traveled at dusk by yourself through a forest somewhere. You just disappeared. So, rewind that clock through history and, how did small towns protect themselves against bandits back in the day?
There were the armed men, and it was Thucydides says that how government came about was there was a good guy, a strong guy in every community who'd pop up. He'd get the robbers off the road, he'd get the pirates off the seas, and then they would say, you're a king. And they would make him a king, and in those days, your son would inherit your job if you were a blacksmith or you shoed horses or whatever you did. You basically passed on your trade to your son. So his son would then become the king. But they found that didn't exactly work, because the son wasn't necessarily a good guy like the dad was, right? And so that's when they instituted senates to check the power of the king. And then when the senates would get too greedy, they instituted the popular assemblies to check the senates. And so that's how you got Rome. That's how you got Athens. Sparta developed a system of checks and balances. And this is how mixed government formed. And in fact, Babylonia under Hammurabi had the similar kind of checks and balances system. So it seems to have been a discovery made by people everywhere, coming from this most basic need for order, for law and order. And the mechanism is, and it's quite true. There was a Belgian historian who looked at the fall of the Roman Empire, and he was looking at the surviving receipts of the port cities on the Western Mediterranean, the trade, seeing how it fell off, and it was pirates. Basically, pirates and the fall of the Roman Empire prevented the revival of trade. So basically, there was no economic recovery from the barbarian invasions because of pirates. What I was surprised to find out was that the Mediterranean trade from the time of the 2nd century did not recover fully until the 19th century, which is amazing that the trade in the Mediterranean in the height of the Roman Empire was greater than it was in the 18th century. In order to conduct trade and business, you have to have basic safety. You have to have law and order. You have to have courts. You have to have police, or at least somebody like knights in shining armor, or, in the case of the Roman Empire, they had Pompey the Great fight the pirates and destroy them all. So you have to have people that establish order. That's the armed man. And he's basic in every situation of restoring civilization. He is a basic component of that restoration. And you talk about farming and all the survival people, but what we often don't talk about is that, well, who are we going to trust? Will we be pulled together and be able to get along? And then there's the question of foreign invasions. Whenever these things happen, break down, people become mobile. So you see people migrating into the US now. They're not armed, but in a complete breakdown, those people would be carrying weapons. And this is what happened when civilization collapsed in the early 5th century, when the Western Roman Empire completely was overrun. And we could be facing the similar kind of situation today if everything broke down as you're describing.
Well, that'll leave you with something to think about for the weekend and how you can get prepared to really chew on a few of these questions and ideas. It's not there to scare you or point out all these things that are going wrong. Okay, that's just the indication. We could see that. But then to get you to think of a solution during this time, because we could talk about the problems all day long, but again, it's about trying to get the mind to create solutions during this time. If you're, thinking about security right away, well, maybe it's talking with just 3 or 4 of your closest neighbors. So in the interim, before that larger, like you say, bubble or circle arounds and evolves around in layers of that at least you have your own internal bubble of security of 4 or 5 households that can at least keep that little space safe for a minute until something else is figured out. But again, it's all about just trying to get the awareness out there of getting people to think about the solutions and knowing how things have recurred in the past. So I'll leave it there. And Jeffrey, any last thought to sign us out with? And again, I want it to be a hopeful message of through history, we've gotten through this. We've always made these changes. We're here. There's 8 billion people now. So obviously it wasn't catastrophic for all. So how are we going to get through this and thrive during these times based on historical patterns by identifying the problem first?
Well, Americans may be the best people in terms of surviving this and getting through it because we come out of a tradition of being a frontier society. We're a society of can-do and engineering. We've got the Yankee spirit in much of us. And of course, we are already underpopulated as a continent. We are not as badly overcrowded as China or Europe. We don't have some of the problems that some of the other continents. We have more arable land than anybody else, any other country. So we start with all these advantages. We have immediate energy supplies in Canada and in our own country. So we have, of all the countries in the world, this is probably the one you want to be in if such things are going to happen. We're on the brink of all kinds of incredible discoveries that could, who knows, who could help us to survive as a society. So these are all hopeful things.
Yeah, thanks for the last thoughts there. I've been talking with J.R. Nyquist, Jeffrey Nyquist. You can check him out, jrnyquist.blog. That's blog for some of the writings that discuss some of these very same issues. Leave a comment below. What's your solution for this? That's the whole thing I would like to ask is a call to action. Leave a comment below on what you think your solution would be to some of these conundrums that we've discussed today. So anyway, I appreciate you listening. Thanks for your time, and bye for now.
It's unknown if early man knew they would be the progenitors of great civilizations, or if they knew when their empires would fall and disappear into history. Fortunately for us as modern man, we can recognize that we are at the precipice, a point in history where we can see the cycle changing. Where we go from here is up to us.
Howdy, partner. You know people are having dinner and the smart ones are eating beef. Let me tell you a brief history, or more accurately, a beef history of dinner. Domestication of cattle happened around 8000 BC, but that's not when beef became what's for dinner. We've been eating beef since times before history. The earliest cave paintings have beef eloquently depicted on the walls. Those cave drawings of the hunt were for the aurochs, a primitive bovine. That's right, beef. Like I said, people are having dinner now, and the smart ones, well, they're eating beef. Americans want great food today, but we also want to have great food to eat if things go south in a hurry. Unlike most companies that take the cheapest, worst parts of the cow, then turn them into beef crumbles, whatever that is. They freeze dry them in hopes that their customers will never actually try to eat it. Our premium beef cubes are sous vide, freeze dried, and ready to be eaten right now, or in a decade from now. We want you to eat our beef now, so you can buy more. Prep with steaks, not with beef crumbles. This is a high-quality product. It's all American beef and 100% natural. None of that craziness of lab-grown meat and mRNA jabs. Our beef has a shelf life of 10+ years. This is high-quality cooked and freeze-dried beef for long-term storage or not. Eat well today and eat well tomorrow. Click the link in the description to get your Prepper beef with Prepper All Naturals, so you will always know what's for dinner.